Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is expected to attack the Conservatives' record on public finances in a speech to the Commons later on.
She's accusing the previous government of overspending this year's budgets by billions of pounds. Well, we're joined now by the Shadow Transport Secretary, Helen Whately, who's in Westminster. Helen Whately, good morning to you. So the Chancellor says there is a £20 billion black hole in the public finances that your government left behind. Where is the money?
Well, I think the Chancellor is unfortunately setting out a narrative that is going to lead to Labour putting up taxes. But we should really start with some of the facts. And we all know, it's agreed on, that when Labour came into government on the 5th of July, they took over a strong economic legacy. They took over the fastest growing economy in the G7. They took over inflation back down to 2%. They took over historically low unemployment, and the deficit halved since we came into government in 2010. So they took over a really strong economic position. Yes, of course, there are always pressures in finances. But I think, as I said right at the start, what Labour is doing here is setting out a plan that is going to lead to them putting up taxes, even though they said during their election campaign that they were not going to do that.
How can you describe the economy and the finances as being in a strong position? Your own government, your own Chancellor said there were some very difficult decisions that had to be made about tax and spending, couldn't promise any further tax cuts given the state of the nation's finances. I don't know how you can describe the economy as being in a strong position.
I think both of those things are true. So the reason I said it was strong was because of, I said, we had returned through a difficult period following the pandemic, of course, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine and higher inflation, to that inflation coming right down, also the deficit coming down, and the fastest growth in the G7. So that is a good
over a very
outlook.
Specific small period, Helen Whately.
Actually, that's over an increasing period of time if you look back through some of the numbers and the analysis.
It was the first quarter of the year.
So we're seeing the fastest growing economy in the G7. And then, yes, of course, there will be pressures on finances. There always are. This is part of being in government, is you face difficult decisions. But I think that Labour should have been honest with the public about the way that they were going to handle those difficult decisions. So when we've been in government and we've been facing those kind of difficult decisions, like for instance pressures on public sector pay, we've looked for the right ways to make savings. In fact, our manifesto included plans for substantial savings on welfare through welfare reform. By contrast, Labour and Rachel Reeves said over 50 times that they weren't going to put up taxes, but it looks like that is what they're going to do to handle these pressures.
It's interesting that this figure of 20 billion is the number that Rachel Reeves has put on the shortfall. And I just want to play you a clip. This is from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. We spoke to Paul Johnson there, and he's got a very specific understanding of that 20 billion. Let's just play it.
It's very striking that if this problem is about £20 billion big, that is exactly the scale of the national insurance cuts implemented by Jeremy Hunt just before the election. Now, if those cuts were implemented in the knowledge that there was this kind of hole, that's not good policy, to put it mildly.
So that's Paul Johnson at the IFS, says that £20 billion shortfall is about what it cost to implement those national insurance cuts. The Conservatives were not honest with the public about the state of the finances, were they?
So as I said a moment ago, we were making different choices, and in our manifesto we also committed to different choices. Of course, we would have liked to have brought taxes down further, and we were clearly under pressure to do that. But we were actually prudent about that, making tax cuts where we could, the national insurance one you referred to there. But on the other hand, setting out plans for how we could control public spending and balance the books. Balance the books just as we did back in March at the budget, and that was verified both by the Office of Budget Responsibility, which of course many people have talked about the fact that actually Rachel Reeves would have known about the state of public finances because we have the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR, which gives the public and the opposition the opportunity to know the state of the public finances before they come into government.
So how would you describe the state of the finances?
Well, as I set out right at the beginning of this conversation, actually, while Labour is going out there and trying to tell everybody that it's all so difficult for them, this is just them setting a narrative for tax rises that they want to bring in later on. But actually, they took over an economy that had the fastest growth in the G7, that had the deficit halved compared to when we took over in 2010, that had historic low unemployment and that had inflation back down at 2%. So really good fundamentals for them to build on in government.
The reason I'm really confused, Helen Whately, is that on one hand you're telling me that you've left an economy that was in a very good shape, but also you're telling me that Labour should have known about the state of the public finances. Which is it?
Well, it is both of those things. So we left the economy in that after making difficult financial decisions ourselves, and of course, following the pandemic, when a significant amount of spending, we've spent around 400 billion supporting people's lives and livelihoods, and actually helping us have that strong economic growth following it. So we have left that positive position for Labour to build on. We now know, and of course Rachel Reeves has talked about this as well, the importance of economic growth on the back of that. But that growth has to go hand in hand with discipline over public spending, at looking at where you can make reforms. As I said, welfare reforms expected to save around 12 billion. Another area is increased productivity in the public sector and across government, which we were looking to save about 20 billion on. I don't see Labour planning to make those kind of disciplined decisions in government. And actually, the fact is, no, to govern is to choose, and these are choices that they need to make. And I'm truly, truly disappointed that they stood on a manifesto at the election, which was that they wouldn't put up taxes for people. Rachel Reeves said over 50 times that she wasn't going to put up taxes on working people, and it really does look like that is something that they are planning to do.
They've said they won't put up taxes, personal taxes, so by that would mean VAT, income tax or national insurance.
Well, they did very specifically say a set of taxes that they wouldn't do, which does limit the particular choices that they will have over which taxes they will put up. But the fact is, taxes in general do affect many, many people. And if they're trying to put themselves forward as a party of economic growth is indeed what the country wants, they need to be very careful, because putting up some of the taxes that there's speculation about are exactly the sort of taxes that can curtail growth.
OK, Helen Whately, good to talk to you. Thank you. And we will talk to Labour a little later in the programme as well.